Hi, kumusta po kayo? How are you? And thank you for tuning in to another edition of Paul de Guzman Presents Art. So it's a really cold day today here in Vancouver. You can't see it right now, but we had a dump of snow last night, and the temperature right now is like about -8. So, which is actually kind of like unusual for Vancouver because we never get anything like that. But, nothing you can do about it, it's the weather, and it is winter here after all. I want to also mention some thank yous to some recent subscribers to the channel. Thank you very much for your engagement. It's so great to sort of have new people coming into the channel and discovering art, not just contemporary art, but also some historical materials at the same time. And also, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that we are on the unceded and ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, which is also commonly known as the city of Vancouver. So we are visiting the CSA Space, which is in the Mount Pleasant area, and it's quite a nice little space. They opened a ceramic show, actually. Today's the first day, and I just happened to be in the neighborhood, and I thought I'd just come by and have a look. It's quite an interesting adventure trying to get into the gallery because what you do is you go down to the bookstore called Pulp Fiction Books and then have a piece of identification so that you can leave it with them so they can give you the keys to the gallery. And then this is actually we're actually inside the building right now, and we're just gonna go up the stairs and we're gonna go and have a look at the show that's currently on. The nice thing is about this building is that it's really well heated. So it's kind of nice to just go inside and warm yourself up because it's -8 outside. It was actually supposed to be like -11 or -12 overnight. So yeah, it's kind of nice. So nice and warm inside. So this is the facade of the CSA gallery. There's a bit of information about the work, and the work we're going to go and have a look at is by an artist named Charles Bound, and it's curated by Christopher Brayshaw. And the show's title is RETROSPECTACLE. So let's go inside, have a look. It's kind of dark. Just gonna go switch on the lights, and off we go. So I'm just gonna go and pan the gallery, but before that I'm just gonna lock the door so that we're not interrupted. It's a rather intimate gallery, and it's really nice how my voice reverberates through the walls. And I don't know if you know this, but I really love ceramics. I mean, there's been a lot of interest in a lot of crafts these days. For example, ceramics and pottery and macrame. And I think the pandemic pretty much had some sort of was responsible for that, because during the pandemic a lot of people had a lot of free time at home. So they were kind of looking at certain activities that they can do to pass the time. And so a lot of artists who are kind of dealing with the ceramic arts are becoming more and more important to the entire sort of a landscape of contemporary art. And Charles Bound is, I don't know who Charles Bound is. Basically, when I got the newsletter from the CSA Space, written by Christopher Brayshaw, he is one of the curators for the space. There's actually 3 curators, and I was reading Chris's essay on Charles Bound, and I'll tell you what I know from a little bit of research that I did last night. As I pan through some of these works that he has, we're going to go and sort of do a little bit more of close up on some of these works. But from what I've read, Charles Bound, he's in his 80s right now. He was born in New York City, and I think part of his earlier life he spent in Africa. And also, I think he also traveled to Japan to teach English as a second language, perhaps. And he's also a published author, and he also is currently living in the UK right now. So I was looking at the list of these works, and roughly half of them are actually not for sale. And it could be that a lot of the pieces may have been shipped from the UK over here to Canada, because from what I've read, Chris was, this is what I surmised from what I was reading. Christopher Brayshaw, the curator, was in the UK, and he was able to meet Charles Bound at a studio, and he had a chance to actually sort of spend a lot of time talking about basically art and life in general. And he was really taken aback about the summary or the summary of artistic experience that Charles has, because he never, from what I can read, he didn't really go into art. So he is first and foremost a self-taught potter. And with pottery, it's really more about the form and also the source of clay that is actually quite valued in the production of ceramics. Because the thing about it is that if you want to be a potter and you want to sort of source your clay, you can basically just go to an art supply store and get a bunch of clay for you to sort of go and play with, really, in your kiln or on your potter's wheel, or however you actually do it, like hand building or whatever. But there's also like a school of potters who tend to sort of like look at sourcing their own clay, and that in itself becomes important in the forms that are created. I mean, being a person in his early to mid 80s, a lot of these forms tend to kind of like have this sort of like aged, rugged presence to them. There's another piece underneath the table that I'm going to go and have a look at there. And the thing about pottery is that it's one of those things that is both utilitarian and aesthetic. I was just looking at this piece over here. I mean, if you are visiting the gallery, there's really nobody here except yourself. And you can basically just pick a few things up and just examine the pieces at your leisure. Just be careful, because some of them are actually not for sale. This one particularly has a really nice sort of like glazing. And there's also a lot of like almost primordial sort of mark making that's happening on the surface of the ceramic. I mean, I love ceramics, but I have to be very careful about it because I live in a house that has a cement floor. And so I've had a lot of ceramic pieces break. But it's also, there's this sense of tactility about ceramic pieces, like there's this sense about the earth, the sense about having this primordial history even before you actually look at the work. And I'm just trying to see where my favorite is. And there's this entire sort of like history of pottery making in the UK. All you have to do is sort of like watch the Antiques Roadshow, and you'll see that there's like Staffordshire and Wedgwood and all of that. But these are more sort of the influences are really more like Eastern Japanese type of ceramics and Chinese ceramics. When you look at these vessels that are the chawan vessels, which are the tea vessels, you know, they have that sort of sense of not being worked too hard. It's not about being perfect. It's about sort of like an evidence of a life lived, or an evidence of where it primordially comes from. And I think that's the thing I really like about ceramics, is that it doesn't pretend to be needing to be perfect, you know? It doesn't, you can accept the faults. It's almost like this ancient Eastern sort of philosophical phrase that says you can't be more perfect than God. So ceramics have that sort of like sense about it ingrained in it. You know, when you take clay and you fashion it and you expose it to high temperatures, and it's been done for thousands of years, because you know, you go you go as far as the ancient Egyptians, and you will find evidence of pottery and stoneware. And perhaps it was one of those, I don't know how it began, but maybe it's one of those accidental things that happened. Somebody was playing with clay, and then there was a fire, and then when they were kind of like looking at the rubble, they found this sort of like hardened earthenware that transformed something that's very viscous and liquefied to something very hard and very sturdy. And that pretty much began the entire journey of ceramics and pottery. So I'm gonna go and focus on something that I really, really like. This was actually the image on the invitation. There is no opening for this show because, you know, I think the artist is in the UK and probably doesn't want to travel because there's still COVID out there. That must be his chop mark. I'm thinking that's his chop mark. Let me see if I can focus on that. Yeah, that could be his chop mark. This, unfortunately, is not for sale. But if you fancy a visit to the CSA Space here in Vancouver, all you have to do is go to the 2400 block of Main Street, go to Pulp Fiction Books, go to the reception area, ask to see if you can go to the gallery. They will give you a set of keys, and in exchange for those set of keys, you would have to give them some sort of like identification, like a driver's license or some sort of like, I don't know, Visa card or something, so that they can sort of like guarantee that they're going to get the keys back. And then you can just go up the stairs, and you can just take your time in admiring these pieces. I'm just going to try and see if I can go and have a look and what vantage point I really like. Some of them are actually kind of, like this particular one is kind of interesting because it's just, it's a lump of clay. You know, it totally has no sense of utilitarianism about it. It's just, it's sculpture now, you know, and that's the thing about ceramics, is that, you know, you can sort of like deal with the aspects of utilitarianism as you see fit. So I hope you like this video. If you do, please feel free to click the thumbs up button. Also consider subscribing to the channel. It's free, and I would love to welcome you into engaging with art in all of its varied forms. I will have some information in the description area, so please feel free to refer to that. The address, the times that they're open, how to get to the gallery, and also some information about the website, because Charles Bound has a website and it has a lot of really interesting things to say. He has a lot of interesting things to say about ceramics and art and life. So it's well worth going in and having a look. Again, thank you for your patience and for joining me here in this gallery space at CSA Space in Vancouver. And I'm gonna wrap it up. And maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat, which means thank you very much for your time. You have a great day, and I am out of here. Goodbye.